Okay, what I'm going to talk about now is where I left off on my last video, where I decided to put the O1 level onto the deck of the ship to close up the gaps. And the gaps that I was wanting to close up are right around here. Well, I've closed them up. They're really tight, really solid. And now I'm going to talk shoulda, coulda, woulda. If I had this to do over again, I'd put that O1 level and glue it to that deck before I did anything else. These pieces here, these are facades that are put on that have all the detail on them, and they're just glued to that O1 level. I'd put those on after this was glued to the deck, because I would push them down and have them really tight against the deck. That would just minimize the amount of filling, because you don't want to see any gaps between the deck and the superstructure. It would have made it easier as well. Now I would have still had a lot of cleanup to do on the upper part up here, but that would be easier to do than what I have to do now. And that's not a big deal, but I'm glad I got to that point when I did. So I'm ready now to begin to mount other pieces on here, and I'm going to completely mount all these along with as much as the photo etch as goes on it. And I imagine it's mostly handrail, but I've got spotlights and things like that to put on it. All of these spots have something that go on them, and once I get all that done, I'll be ready to go to the next level. But I want, before I do any of that, I want to do the photo etch for the SPS-49 radar, and I'll show you how that looks in just a minute. Alright, we're going to try this a little bit different right now. I'm zoomed in on the book. You remember the book that I put together. I've got to get back into this photo etch, and the one piece I want to put at the very top of the ship is this. This is the SPS-49 radar. Now this is a very, very small, very fiddly piece. So the first thing you want to do when you look at photo etch is try to understand their instructions, because everybody will probably do it differently. So let's first take this piece, which is piece 262, and we'll pull these out in a little bit. And you'll notice it has these arrows. It just shows a curve. It doesn't tell you the angle of the curve. It doesn't tell you how to make the curve. But when you see how small this piece is, this piece will kind of scare you how to make that curve. The next picture simply shows taking this piece and turning it over 180 degrees. You can tell that it just means turn it over. Well, that starts back here, so you have to go back to the other side of the page to part number 263. You'll notice these symbols right here show an angle. It doesn't tell you what that angle is, and sometimes it does. Even on these instructions we'll see it, but right now you can't see what that angle is, but it's something greater than 90 degrees, and you end up with this piece. Well, this piece then is what you will flip over on top of this piece. Well, how do you hold that curve? How do you glue it together, etc., and so on, to end up with this piece? That's what I'm going to get to next. Now let's go down to this next set. 257 is a big flat piece. Well, it shows 90 degrees. Well, 90 degrees they can put on here because you can pretty well tell what 90 is. You fold this side up 90, you fold this side up 90. This folds, but it doesn't say what the degree is on it. So that's going to tell you that you're going to have to pay very close attention as you fold these together to see how they come together, because I have a feeling some of these angles that are in here will line up, and whatever those degrees are, that's what it is, and you'll end up with this piece. Well, this piece then connects up with this piece up here, so that you've got... Okay, enough of all that. Let's move over here to the low table and take a look at the actual photo etch, so that you can compare the actual photo etch with the pictures. The pictures look big, they look clear, they look clean. The photo etch is tiny. So let's go take a look at it. So here we go. These are those pieces that I pointed out in the book. You can see they're very small compared to dimes and pennies. And if you look at my little finger, very small. So this has to be folded 1, 2, 3, 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. This has to be folded in half. This has to be curved around something. Then this needs to, or not in half, but with some kind of an angle. And then this has to be curved. So what order do we do that in? Well, I'm going to establish the curve for this. I'm going to fold that to some angle that approximates the distance between 2 stripes that are on here, and glue this onto this before I do anything else. Now how am I going to do that? Well, I've been collecting these tubes, and I better back out now. I've been collecting these tubes that things come in, and I put saw blades in it and what have you. Well, what I'm going to do with it now is just take a look at them to determine how I can get a proper curve in this piece. Well, it's pretty obvious that if I try to curve it around that, it might be just a little bit too steep, but you got to remember this is very small. Now, obviously these are too big. I don't think I want that kind of a curve. But what I believe I've decided to do, I'm going to get a piece of cardstock and cut it basically in that shape and hold it against these and see which one appears to be, you know, something that looks more. So here we are. This is just a little bit oversized, but that's perfectly all right. I'm just trying to get the main part of the curve. If I were to curve this around this cylinder, that would make almost a semicircle, and it's the same width or very close to it as the piece that I'm trying to curve. So this is going to be too thin. This is the next thick one that I have, and I'll be honest with you, when I look at this, it starts to look similar to the one that's in the picture. But let's take the next biggest one and try to visualize what that looks like. And I'll be honest with you, that really looks like the one that I'm going to want to use. So how am I going to handle it when I fold it? Well, I don't want to handle it. I really hate handling it. But I want to get that curve in there, and then we'll stabilize it with this piece here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tape one end of that to this cylinder. Now when I say tape it, believe me, very, very little tape will be used. Alright, here's what it amounts to. A little tiny piece of tape. I'm going to barely catch the end of this with the tape, just barely touching it. Alright, I'll lift it with that. I'm going to tape it down like that. Now, I'm not just going to curve this around and tape the other end. I've pretty much decided what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take this cardstock that I used, and I'm going to cut a piece about the same width, and I'll get some more tape, And I don't have to be as picky about this one. I can make sure it's got plenty of tape on it, because I'm not going to tape it on the brass. I'm going to come back here and tape it on the plastic like that. Then wrap this around. And for now, I'll put a little piece of tape over here to hold it. There, now you're not really going to be able to see much in that, but it's curved underneath this, and I'm going to leave it here because I don't need to touch it again for a while. And I'm going to work on this tiny little piece. Now for that one, I'm using the commercial bender. Get a couple of things out of my way here. So you can see you've got to kind of think ahead on these things and try to handle them as little as possible. Tweezers are good, but I find it difficult to get tweezers up underneath it to actually get a hold of it without bending it. And also in this particular instance, I've got to bend this entire piece, and I don't have a spot big enough. So let me see. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is see if I can turn this around. And I'm hoping when I turn it around, it will fit really well. And I should have probably taken this tiny piece off so that I wouldn't run a risk of damaging it. But I'll just have to be a little more careful. Now you'll notice that this long broad edge lines up right where the other one did when I had it turned around. But I now have a much longer edge to fold against, which is what I want. Now, there weren't any instructions that came with this tool that told me to do that. I just looked at it and decided that's what I wanted to do. So I now make sure that's in camera, because I have a hard time seeing, and most of you who do videos know what that's like. I wish I had one of those little 7-inch monitors that I could put on this. But not right now. Make sure it's good and clean. There. Alright. Now's where the tweezers might come in handy, but not to tweeze, just to move this around. I'm going to pull my magnifier down. That actually looks pretty good. So I'll lock it down. Now, I go back to my book before I bend. I try to get an idea what they were trying to say when they just had the V that showed to bend it into a V. Well, on this, and how do I say this? On the actual antenna itself, there are 2 rows. And those rows, I think, are the width that I need to fold these little legs to. Let me peel this back. And I don't know if you'll be able to see this, if it ever go into focus, because it is very tiny. But anyway, I've got 2 little ribs on this antenna. One here and one here, and I think that is how wide I want to bend this to. But I only get one chance, and this is where you just have to eyeball it and hope you get close enough. And we'll fold this back around, let it sit a little more. Let's see if I can get this razor blade up under here. There we go. Now I know it's more than 90. And that's a little bit difficult to do, so I'm going to pull this out. When working with photo etch, I highly recommend these self-closing kind. If you're to try to depend on your hand squeezing tight enough to hold this, you're probably going to get it a little too, just not a lot too tight, but a little bit too tight. And you may bend it or crimp it. With these, you just let loose of them and it will hold, and you don't have to worry about how strong your hand is or weak your hand is or whatever. At least that's what I do. Okay. And there we have it. It's bent. I'm pretty sure you won't be able to see this. I went up to the hardware store and got some paint stir sticks, put a piece of this black cardboard on, hoping it would help get some of this stuff in focus, but I'll be honest with you, I don't know if it's going to work. Anyway, that's about the best I'm going to be able to do. So that is now bent, and I'm going to want it to conform to that same curve that this is under. Alright, so now I'll go to this other little piece that's a real bear and see if I can get it bent. I'm going to do pretty much the same thing with it. These little pieces, they're extremely delicate. Extremely delicate. So I'll bring this over here, tighten it down, and we'll do the same thing. This first bend, as we showed in the instructions, was a 90-degree bend. Pull that out. Put it back in, and we'll do another 90-degree bend. The more bends you get in one of these tiny pieces, the more difficult it is to handle it. Just have to take care, take a little time, and then bend it. This piece has another bend in the sides. It'll be another 90°. And this is where it starts getting very, very tricky. This pin will pretty much close it in if I can get it right. And this is where this tool no longer serves me very well. And I'm going to have to just put a little bit of pressure on it. Now that I've got it crimped, I can put a little pressure on it and bring it down and over. Now what's going to happen, there's a gap right here, but I'm going to put some super glue on that gap and hold this down against the super glue for just a second, so that will pretty much close that in. And what we end up with is, if I can get that, what I end up with is an enclosed piece. That's probably not focusing. So these are very tiny. It's going to be real hard to show what this looks like until I get it all glued together. So I'll do that and then I'll jump back on it. We interrupt this irregularly scheduled program for a special network announcement. Mail call. Okay guys, time for a mail call. This is going to be a very brief mail call. I don't want to get into a real long drawn out one. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of mail, but I've got some special mail. I managed to get from Randy Johnson at Dogs Model Shop. Fantastic shop car. He's got what that looks like a Spitfire and 2 Mustangs in the era that I'm working on for my brother. So that's really special. Thanks a lot, dog. I appreciate that. I've got a card from Jamie G's Scale Model Garage, and that is a great one. I love that car. There were a lot of those back in my era, I tell you that. Very good card. Appreciate that a lot. And then Third Gear Speed Shop. Thank you, Travis. Great card. They'll go right there with the rest of them. I am trying my best to figure out how I want to display them because I don't have wall space. However, I do have an idea for the door fronts for my cabinets up here. We'll get to that in a minute. And finally, I got Captain Nemo Model Zone. There you go. Look at that. Those are some nice cars. Anyway, thank you a lot. I really appreciate that. Now for the big one. I've got a gift from Steve Mottram. He mainly does, I guess, tanks and armor and things like that. But he saw my B-29 Super Fortress that I have up here, and he has wanted to do a buddy build with me. Now, I don't think we're going to do this until after the first of the year, but he was out shopping with his son, and he found a book. He sent this to me. Boeing B-29 Super Fortress book. This thing has detail like you wouldn't believe. It's fantastic source of information. He got one for himself. They had 2 of them, so he sent me one. And I'll tell you what, it'd be hard for me not to build this thing now because you talk about details. If you want details for a model, get you a good source book. This is a great source book, and one of the first places I headed to was the suspension and landing gear, because that model, I know for a fact, if you use the landing gear that came in the model, it won't support the plane because the plane's about 3 feet across wingspan and about 3 feet long, round numbers. And the landing gear and styrene just won't hold it. So they do make an aftermarket, it's a white metal, I assume. That's what most of the metal castings are, white metal. If anybody has an idea where I can hunt those down, let me know. And Steve, if you found them, let me know. So get over there to Marty's Military Modeling, MQ. Because I tell you what, if I can pull this off, my health holes, that's the one I want to build. But I've got to make a good progress on the New Jersey, because that plane will fill this table. So that's a lot of work to do. So anyway, again, Steve, thank you so much for the book, and I look forward to working something out with you, and hopefully that'll start in January. Okay, I'm going to wrap this one up. I've got a lot more footage out there. I've done a lot more work than what I've shown on this video, but it's getting a little long. I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of work here and get this edited in, try to get it posted today, and hopefully within a couple of days I'll be able to post the other part of this top mast, antenna mast. There are 2 antennas that go up there. The other one is smaller than the one I've just been working on, so that's exciting. Yeah, I just cut my throat, but I like photo etch. I don't necessarily like doing photo etch, but I like the results I get with it. It just takes patience. So anybody wants to jump in there, start with something fairly simple and work your way up. That's all I can suggest. So I'm out of here. Everybody have a good day.